Welcome back. I'm Ann Beal, and I am here with Christy and Kevin Beam. We're talking about their book, Miracles from Heaven. The movie is called Miracles from Heaven, and it is about their daughter, Annabelle, through an incredible illness and a miracle after an accident.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There's so much of a social component to eating, and, she would go and want to go to a birthday party and be with a friend, and, or even just us sitting here around the dining room table, and it's, we're trying to have a family time and be able to hang out and talk, and she would, there were a lot of times that literally we would just have to kind of put her to bed, and she'd, say, Mommy or Daddy, I'm really hurting, and there really wasn't an answer. It was just like, we know, baby, and, why don't you just try and go to sleep, and maybe when you wake up in the morning, you'll feel a little better. And, as a person who kind of commits your life to trying to help heal and fix things, to have that be about the only empty promise you can make to your daughter that's sitting there hurting was really, really wearing on the family and challenging. And I think she handled it way better than I did. She was very... I don't even know the best way to describe it, but she handled things with just such amazing grace, and would just kind of say, it's okay, and I'd be like, I'm sorry that we can't make the pain go away. And she's like, it's okay, Daddy, and so she is, all of them are just absolutely amazing, but there was never a time she wasn't hurting, and very rarely was there a time that she wasn't kind of hungry. So it was always that balance between, I want to eat, I know I need to eat. Maybe everybody around me is eating. But as soon as I take this food in, I'm going to be in pain. So how bad do I really want to eat?
And was she weak? Because the day that she went out to play, where she got hurt, she had just gotten back from Boston. And was she not feeling very well or weak?
Correct. She was. She spent most of the day on the couch in her standard fetal position with a heating pad, and was watching Disney Channel, and she was weak. Annabelle was struggling mentally at that point. She was struggling physically, and emotionally. She was just kind of tired of hurting all the time and never getting relief.
Which you can understand. Yeah, for sure. She was getting depressed.
Yes. And she was weak. She didn't get a lot of nutrition to help her be healthy and strong.
But she had two sisters that always wanted her to play.
Yeah, and a very persistent older sister who was so wonderful with, our whole family made it very important that Annabelle was not defined by her illness. That wasn't who she was. And so I feel like Abby carried that out and acted that out the best of everybody, because even though Annabelle may not have been able to do things as well as the other two girls, Abby still was insistent upon the idea that she could at least try.
So she did that day.
She did that day. She climbed trees with her sisters, and that's their favorite. Annabelle's favorite thing to do is climb. They're all little monkeys, and Annabelle is just an amazing climber. And so that day they were climbing trees. And they insisted that she come go with them. And so she did.
And that was a pretty high tree. When you just read it and it says 30 feet up, right? I tried to picture limbs hanging down that they were able to crawl up in. They didn't just shimmy up 30 feet.
Yeah.
But they went up high. They weren't as afraid as you would think a lot of kids that age would be. And I had 4 brothers. And so I'm thinking, oh, God, the whole story, I just can picture that. Like they jump on trains that were moving, and I was the little one. Mom would go, take Annie, and they would just try to talk me into doing anything. And it's crazy, some of the stuff we did.
Goodness.
My mom would have a heart attack. And so I could see, because I'm thinking 30 feet, that's high. And so they were playing in the tree. So why don't you tell this story?
So they were outside climbing trees, and this tree is a monster. I don't know how tall it actually is. I mean, it's a monster tree. But they had managed there were no lower limbs to use to climb up the tree. So they had used the stability of neighboring trees around it, little saplings, and they put their back against the baby trees and their feet against the trunk of the massive tree, and they wiggled up like caterpillars until they got to this one branch that was stretched out, and they got up to that branch, and they They were sitting on that branch, just Abby and Annabelle, because Adeline was too little to climb. She was not quite capable of making that climb. And they were just talking. And, I say this all the time, that I wish that I could have been that little bird. What did they talk about? And still today, I don't know what they talked about. But what were those sweet sisters sharing?
Up in that tree.
Up in that tree. Because what we had just gone through in Boston was horrific. And what were they saying? But then that branch that they were on began to give way. And so Abby, and she is so brilliant, she had a plan, immediately devised a plan and said, Annabelle, there's a hole right there where a previous branch had been and broke off and had fallen. And so it left a hole. And she said, Annabelle, go get in that hole and then you'll get your weight off this branch. I will get down and then you come out and I'll help you down. Because she was too weak to get down by herself. And it was a brilliant plan. We just didn't know that hole dropped. And Annabelle went in the hole head first as she fell 30 feet head first and was trapped in the base of this hollowed out cottonwood tree.
Which I didn't even know that's possible. And I think that, I don't think
I had no idea. I've been out in trees and raging the country and everything my whole life, and I had no idea that a tree would truly hollow out like that. It was like basically looking down into a well, but you're way up inside of this tree. And the tree has since fallen over. It's probably a 90, 100-year-old cottonwood tree, just a massive tree, but it had already lost one limb. And then not very long after the incident that happened here, that limb that they were sitting on fully broke and fell. And then the tree itself, probably about 2 years after this happened, the entire tree blew over. And so it was a tree that was at the very end of its life cycle, and the limb that had fallen had left a portal in there that opened up into a completely, like a huge pipe or a huge well. And, I've commented numerous times being out in the country climbing trees and all, how there wasn't, bees in there or fire ants down in the base. We were in Texas where everything kind of bites and stings you, and so how out here on this property that we have, there was a tree that was, as opposed to something that was out to harm her, was actually there to help protect her, and ended up some pretty amazing and miraculous things happened in that tree. But just the fact that the mere fact that she wasn't injured falling in the tree, and that there wasn't a family of raccoons in the bottom of it, or anything like that could have just completely changed the whole complexity of her rescue.
Now she fell 30 feet head first.
Correct.
And was unconscious for a while, right?
Correct.
Inside the tree.
Inside the tree.
So what is the diameter of the tree around? Do you have any idea? Like how much space was actually in there?
I could have gotten into there, but I wouldn't have been able to turn around. So I would say maybe a 3.5 to 4 feet diameter on the inside. She was, I actually climbed up and looked down inside and saw her, and she was laying on her right side, kind of in a fetal position, and there was room dirt all the way around her. So her feet and her head would have been kind of touching the wood, but there was room on either side of her. So it was pretty close to a full circle, probably 4.5 feet diameter or so. So a pretty good amount of room. But when we were discussing trying to go down and potentially someone go down and get there, there was no one who was small enough to go down inside of there and have room enough to reach down and get her or anything.
And literally she should have died.
Yes.
And so she was unconscious for a while.
Yes.
And then when he said portal, I thought it actually kind of was. Really?
It was.
So what happened?
It absolutely was. Well, Annabelle was in the tree about 5 hours is what we estimate. It took the firefighters about 3 hours to get her out because she was non-responsive. Once Annabelle became responsive, she assisted in her own rescue. She was amazing, and the firefighters were amazing. They got her out, strapped her to a board, care flighted her and I to the hospital. And Annabelle, we were prepping me saying, we've never had a child fall 30 feet head first and not suffer paralysis or broken bones. She walked away without a bug bite, she was wet, muddy, scratches, and had a few bruises, but that was it, and a minor concussion.
But they didn't know that, did they? Until they ran all the tests.
Correct.
It's amazing.
They did not know that. The next day, we were traveling down the road in the truck, and we are just kind of all in shock because of what had happened. In the book, we go into detail about what had been going on in Boston right before this, and then what we had just endured with the trauma of the tree and Annabelle. I think the whole family is just kind of in shock, really. Yeah. And Annabelle turns to me just out of the blue, and she says, Mommy, I went to heaven when I was in that tree. And I just looked at her, and I just said, really? What do you say?
Yeah, I would have said
do you
that
say?
same thing. Really?
And she said, yes. And I sat on Jesus' lap, and he told me that it wasn't my time. And I told him I wanted to stay, Mommy, because there's no pain in heaven.
And for her, that would be definitely a relief.
Oh. And she said, but he told me that it wasn't my time and that he had plans for me on earth that I could not fulfill in heaven. And that when the firefighter got me out, there would be nothing wrong with me. And I was thinking, short term, in a box. I said, Annabelle, God is so good. There was nothing wrong with you. You fell. You had such a tragic accident. And look, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. But that's not what she meant.
Right. And I think that you weren't sure about that, right? Mm-hmm. What kind of healing? Like, what did it mean? And that would be, if you could have just asked God. Oh, I have a couple questions.
Right.
But for, how old was she when she fell?
So Annabelle would have been 9 years old. It was in 2011.
Mm-hmm. And so even those words for a 9-year-old, right? And it's startling. Like, I can see my daughter at 9 saying something like that. I would have just been, what?
Well, and there's some great detail in the book about other things she shared with me. And I remember just being I just sat there astounded with my mouth open thinking, how is this coming out of your body? How does your mind even know to say these words? I mean, it just amazing.
That made it more believable.
Yes.
I would think, for sure. Mm-hmm. But still, it would weigh on you, like, what is this? Lord, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And I think that especially how wonderful it would be and how much you guys would all really love for her to be, at that moment to think, well, that would be like the greatest blessing of nothing really, if everything was truly gone.
Yes.
That would, if he's going to protect her, it would be like the utmost of miracles for him to do that. Right?
Yes.
And so how long before you realized she really was healed?
Well, it took us a while. It did. But, right away, Annabelle was busy and happy and playing and active and rarely rarely complaining about pain. And I would realize it had been a few hours, and the medicine that she got every 4 hours around the clock, I would realize had gone 5 or 6 hours. And I would be like, oh, Annabelle, we got to get your medicine. Or, she hasn't asked me for pain medicine, or, but what we gave her didn't really help. But still, it helped her psychologically feel like we were doing something. But anyway, it became time. It had been a couple of weeks, and it was time to give her one of her powerful medications. And it was one of the antibiotics that she rotated on and off. And it was really, really strong antibiotic. And I remember calling the doctor and speaking to the nurse and telling her, look, Annabelle doesn't have any of these symptoms that she has when she needs this antibiotic. I hate to give it to her. And the nurse said, well, she may not be showing them today, but it may be tomorrow or the next day. But if you want to hold off a couple of days, it's okay. I never gave her that medication ever again.
That's amazing. And I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you knew to do that. I guess God probably led you to do that.
Yes.
And you were sensitive to her words. Because so many kids and people, right? I would say kids and elderly will say that a lot, that they are not taken very seriously.
Yes.
And so it's good that you did that. And so how long before all 10 were gone?
Oh, goodness. Maybe, I don't even...
It would have been at least 2, if not 3 months, probably.
Yes, it took a while because of the 10 she were on. Some were major, powerful medications. And so she had to be weaned off of them. And so it took a while to wean her off all of the medications. But I think she's been completely off all of them for maybe 2 years now. I can't even, it's terrible. You would think that would be ingrained in your brain.
Almost full 3 years,
Yeah,
I think,
okay.
since because we're within a month and a half of when she fell.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, that is a very big difference than not a single day without relief, right? And so that is part of what would motivate you and really drive you. I mean, all of it, to want to write it down.
Yes.
And I think that, when you think of the healing when God does something like that, the joy that you feel makes you want to tell it.
Yes.
Stay right here. We'll be right back.